In this demo, we'll demonstrate how one can manage multiple dependent health variables using HealthCorrelator for Excel based on multiple causes. In order to do that, I will copy here into my health data some health data that an expanded data set which is here on a separate sample sheet. And what I'll do is I will copy these columns of data into my health data sheet that comes with HealthCorrelator for Excel. In order to improve the way it looks, I can simply reorganize the variables here, or simply select the option of adjusting the column with auto fit in Excel. I'll just do it quickly manually. So we have several dependent variables here: weight variation, body fat percentage, aerobic exercise, resistance exercise, niacin intake in grams, refined carbohydrate intake, and several dependent variables: systolic blood pressure, diastolic blood pressure, triglycerides, VLDL cholesterol, LDL cholesterol, HDL cholesterol, total cholesterol, and ratios of total cholesterol divided by HDL cholesterol, as well as triglycerides by HDL cholesterol. So I have many more variables here. Some of these dependent variables, from systolic blood pressure on, they may also be mediating variables in that they will influence other variables. For example, systolic blood pressure may also have an effect on triglycerides. Systolic blood pressure is going to be strongly associated with diastolic blood pressure as well. But by and large, these are dependent variables in that they depend on the independent variables here on the left, from refined carbs intake to weight. Obviously, the ratios here will depend on the components of the ratios. For example, total cholesterol by HDL will depend on total cholesterol. So I will go to the main window and I will calculate associations and plot graphs. It will take a little longer for the software to do these calculations because I have more columns. Generally, the amount of time necessary for the calculations, which should be a few seconds, will be dependent on the number of variables that you have, not necessarily the number of rows, but the number of columns on your data set. Okay, so now all my calculations have been completed, and I will go to the variable triglycerides, TG. So when I look at triglycerides, and there's been numbers 11, so I'll go to graphs 11 just to have the triglyceride graphs also on the screen. So on the right I have the graphs, and on the left here I have the coefficients of association. So when you look at triglycerides, it's strongly associated with VLDL cholesterol, and that's something to be expected. And it's also strongly associated with the ratio of triglycerides and HDL, which is to be expected because this ratio is calculated based on triglycerides. And when I come to the third option here, weight, I see here an independent variable, which is a plausible cause of triglycerides. So what this is telling me is that weight is a strong determinant of my triglycerides, which is essentially a measure of fasting triglycerides. In terms of independent variables after weight, we have body fat as also a possible strong determinant. Niacin intake, also possible strong determinant, but less strong than body fat and weight, which is interesting. One could argue, based on these coefficient of associations, that for this particular individual, weight and body fat are more important in the management of fasting triglycerides than niacin intake. Refined carbs also seems to be important, and of course refined carbs will affect body fat and weight in most people. So when we look at graphs, we can see the shapes of the associations here. So we have, for example, this graph that shows the relationship between triglycerides and weight, and again, as indicated by the coefficient of association, the relationship is very strong, and it's not completely linear but very close, and it's such that with an increase in weight in pounds, so we have an increase in triglycerides. Notice that triglycerides are strongly associated with HDL cholesterol. The higher your triglycerides, typically for this individual and most people, the lower is the HDL cholesterol, and vice versa. So this concludes this demo.